Amen. I'm glad now to present our next speaker. We're happy to present Brother Stacy Walker. Stacy's joining us today. He and his younger sister were raised by their grandmother after their mother was murdered. He is now a successful program coordinator for the Casey Foundation. Stacy honors his grandmother by speaking out for policies that support grand families. Would you join me in welcoming Brother Stacy Walker?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for having me here today. Thank you for everyone who helped put this on. Ellen's meeting, really appreciate you all for inviting me. Ty, you did a wonderful job. I've been emailing with you quite a bit. Really appreciate it. And then lastly, thank all the grandparents here today and kinship caregivers. You can go ahead and applaud for that. You are the reason that I'm here today. So I'm going to just start by telling you with a little bit about myself. I was born and raised, we can go to the next slide, in Cedar Rapids. Isn't that a cute kid up there? Cedar Rapids is a town in eastern Iowa not too far away from the mighty Mississippi River. My mother had me when she was 18 years old. There was no father listed on the birth certificate, so I grew up like most other African American kids in my neighborhood, and that was to a single mother. We were living well below the poverty line and in a neighborhood that was infested with drugs and crime. My saving grace was my grandmother. She lived in the same neighborhood, and when I would go visit her home, everything just felt better. Everything felt a little different. Now, my mother was a saint. She was truly a remarkable woman, and she loved me and my kid sister with all of her heart. We can go to the next slide on this one as well. However, our home life wasn't so great. Aside from growing up poor, my sister's father lived with us, and he was unforgivably abusive to my mother. I remember one day hearing the clammy sounds of his fist strike my mother repeatedly. It was a terrible thing hearing the blood-curdling wails of my mother come from behind a locked bedroom door where at least he had the decency to beat her out of sight. He dragged her by her hair from the bedroom into the kitchen where he burned her face over the open flame of the stove. These scenes will never leave me. They will stay and haunt me for the rest of my life. My mother eventually worked up the courage to leave this man, and we moved to a new place, and she began her life anew. One day, one of her good friends who had relocated to New York became very ill, so my mother agreed to spend the summer with her friend looking after her, and she asked my grandmother to take care of myself and my younger sister. And I was actually elated. I looked forward to spending time with my grandmother. However, when my mother left, I would never see her again. She was murdered in Buffalo, New York, and the case was never solved. And just like that, my sister and I no longer had a guardian, we no longer had a mother, and we had no idea what was next. But luckily for us, we had our grandmother. And as the state was preparing to take custody of us, my grandmother was carting us back and forth to court. Even though I was very young, I remember this all quite well. My grandmother struggling to understand the differences between becoming an adoptive parent versus a legal guardian. I remember the judge, a pretty middle-aged woman, asking me rather directly if my grandmother was kind to us. I remember one of the attorneys who worked with my grandmother pro bono, a man by the name of Mark Roberts, who I'm friends with today. Now, my grandmother did a terrific job in raising us. She chose to leave her job at the hospital to look after us. I would later find out that this was a tough decision for her, as this was a job she loved and even went to school later on in life to pursue. Now, we didn't have much, but she made it work somehow. Once I got to college, I started to realize that there were thousands of other grandparents doing the exact same thing my grandmother did. Some of them received great assistance, and some of them, like my grandmother, received very little. And this disparity led me to volunteer for an organization called Generations United to help ensure that all intergenerational families had an advocate, had an ally. Now, Generations United is a DC-based advocacy group that is doing wonderful work representing the interests of thousands of intergenerational families across the United States. And part of what they do is provide a little information concerning the current state of grandfamilies. And this next slide, you'll be able to see it. There are 7 million children living with their grandparents or in households headed by a relative other than their biological parent. Of this 7 million, nearly 1 million of these children don't have their biological parents in their lives at all. And 21% of these grandfamilies are living below the poverty line, with a staggering more than 60% of these grandfamilies still in the workforce. Now, these figures are a bit concerning, as they suggest that we as a society are failing families who need the most help. Now, GU research is right to point out that not every one of these grandfamilies came to exist exactly like mine, but that these grandfamilies come to exist for a variety of reasons, whether it's parental death, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's financial issues, whether it's military deployment, incarceration, mental illness, you name it. Regardless of how these families come into existence, I can't think of any reason why this country needs to ignore these families, and I can think of every reason why we need to invest in these families. Last year, there were more than 500,000 heart surgeries performed in the United States. On April 10th of last year, an American company, Apple, announced a net value of $600 billion, making it the most valuable country in the history of the world. A month before that, in March, a small car-sized robotic vehicle named Curiosity landed safely on the planet Mars after a 350 million mile journey across the solar system. As a society, in just 1 year, we've substantially extended human life. We've witnessed the incredible power of American capitalism, and we've successfully landed man-made technology on the red planet. Yet, we still have not provided adequate resources to grandfamilies around this country. We still have a large number of grandfamilies working long hours to make the ends meet, to put food on the table. And we have made strides, and this fact is not lost on me, but surely we can be doing a lot better. So for those who ask the question, why should we be concerned with investing in grandfamilies like we are sending spacecrafts to Mars? Well, I'll tell you. There are 3 fundamental reasons why. There's an economic imperative, there's a societal imperative, and there's the moral human imperative. Now, firstly, looking at this through a purely economic lens. When families do better, when they're financially stable, they contribute to their communities. Families need groceries, families need appliances, families need services, entertainment. Families are perhaps the biggest economic driver any community could have. Ergo, when strong families are doing better, then their local economies will do better. This logic obviously applies to grandfamilies because it matters not the age or relation of families, because families of all stripes play a big role in stimulating the economies. Now, we all know the facts on this second point. Young men and women who come from stable households fare much better in life. Stability can mean any number of things, but it certainly means a family unit that can meet its basic needs. But time and again, the data reminds us that the most important predictor for happiness and success in the lives of young people growing up today is that they come from loving households. Now, I know grandparents and family members can provide the love, so naturally the larger question becomes, can society provide the basic needs for those grandfamilies? With such a large swath of our grandfamilies living below the poverty line, the answer to that question is suspect at best. If we truly cared about addressing societal ills, we would invest more in our grandfamilies. Now, finally, the most fundamental case to be made is what I will call the moral case or the human case. Making sure our grandfamilies are adequately provided for is the morally just thing to do. And at a gut level, we all know this is right. We know this because we've been conditioned for thousands of years to look after that most sacred social group we call the family. Now, grandparents get to experience this on an extraordinary level because you are now caring for the offspring of your sons or daughters. There is an extra special relationship here. That is your ultra-primal bloodline. Every grandfamily deserves this recognition, as it would tear away from our humanity to deny it. To care for someone, whether it is a spouse or a grandchild or a son or daughter, it calls for love, and love is a powerful thing. It's a mix of hormones, of biochemical reactions. It's made strong by time and experiences. It causes us to go out of our way for others. It causes us to act irrationally and do things that may be detrimental to ourselves only because we know it'll benefit the people we love. When he was writing one of his seminal pieces on evolutionary theory, Charles Darwin mentions the phrase survival of the fittest 2 times. He mentions the word love 95 times. Here you have the man who wrote the book on evolutionary theory telling us that one of the most important things in society and life is love, the concept of love. It's abstract, but we all know what it is. Now, a little bit about my grandmother. She was born in a small, rural, segregated town in Alabama. She recalls an area of the town where the Indians lived. As a young girl, a rare disease caused her to lose her right eye. She had her first of 7 kids at a very young age. She would raise all of them largely on her own, and later in life, she would enroll in a community college and study applied sciences and nursing. Upon graduation, becoming one of the few members of our extended family with a college degree, she would find work in a small hospital in Iowa, and she'd worked there for years. But later, the health problems started to pour on. First, it was severe degenerative bone disease. Next came the high blood pressure and cholesterol. Then the heart disease came. After cancer was discovered in one of her breasts, she would have a mastectomy. A few years later, cancer was found in the remaining breast, and she would have it removed as well. Next, her kidneys would fail, causing her to go on dialysis. She would later receive a kidney transplant from her daughter, my aunt. But then that kidney would fail, and she would go back to dialysis. All told, my grandmother is a fighter. My grandmother is the kindest person I know. She is the bravest person I know. Her name is Shirley Martin, and she is my hero. Now, my grandmother did an awesome job in raising my sister and myself, but I wonder how things might have been had she been able to move us out of the government-subsidized apartment projects that we lived in. I wonder how things might have been had she been able to receive the same sort of benefits some of the foster parents received. Might she have worried a little bit less about making the ends meet? The number one cause of stress for families are money issues, and it is proven that chronic stress carries with it medical repercussions. I wonder, could real investments in grand families lessen the amount of stress they already endure? So speaking on this kind of stress, I'm going to play for you a short video that'll illustrate, some of the stresses that folks in my generation go through. So if we can get that queued up, it's a 2-minute video, and we'll roll that. Take a look.
Joel Manby, CEO of Hirsch & Family Entertainment, is undercover in his own company. His coworkers think he's being filmed for a documentary about someone trying out entry-level jobs.
Morning, Albert.
Hey,
Hey.
morning.
This is John Briggs.
nice to meet you.
He's
My
going
name's
to be
Albert.
working with
Nice
you
to meet
today.
Over here, John, we'll get you on a turnstile.
Okay, let's do it.
This is all about your first impressions, so it's really a fun experience. I grew up at this park. I've been on this park since I was 2 years old. I have all these ideas about theme parks and stuff. It's not just a place I work, it's my passion. I have to work to go to school, and I'm trying to go to school for work. I just doing 10 hours a semester and then working 40 plus hours a week also. Wow.
What do you think the ideal job is here?
I would like to eventually be a CEO of Hershey Properties.
Who's in that job now?
Joel Manby is our CEO.
Well, I have a lot of emotion for Albert. I really respect his passion and energy. That's great, because you can channel that. And it definitely makes me want to try to help in some way. Now it's time for me to reveal my true identity to each of the people I worked with over the past week. Well, I'm actually Joel Manby, and I'm CEO of Hershey Entertainment.
No. That was you, okay? Oh, man.
You've inspired me to start a scholarship program. You're going to get to go to school full time. So you don't have to work all day. You don't have to go to school at night. We're going to actually pay you your 40 hours a week salary while you go to school. We need a lot of people like you with your kind of passion, your kind of enthusiasm.
First thing I'm calling is my parents. I'm gonna be jumping up and down while I'm telling them, and I'm gonna hear my dad. I know he's gonna be so proud.
Isn't that something? Isn't that just moving? That's tough to watch for me. I'm gonna get right to the point. You may have noticed my presentation has to do with the vagus nerve, and many of you are probably wondering, what the hell does Vegas, Nevada have to do with grandfamilies? Well, I'm not talking about Vegas, Nevada. I'm talking about the vagus nerve. It's sometimes called the pneumogastric nerve or the cranial nerve X. It's the 10th of 12 paired nerves in our central nervous system. And the vagus nerve sends sensory information from the body's organs to the brain. Vagus is Latin for the word wandering. I'll come back to that. I'm not here to give a lecture on the central nervous system. I'm here to talk about how the vagus nerve interacts with our everyday lives and how it affects us. Dr. Keltner, a professor of psychology at the University of California, studies emotions. He wants to know what makes us tick, what makes us happy. He would show his subjects photos of the Grand Canyon. He would play stirring music for them. But none of this was working. And then one day, one of his students came in and said, "Doc, why don't we show these students the speech that Barack Obama gave when he was inaugurated for president?" And he said, all right. So he hooked them up to ECGs, and he showed them the speech Barack Obama gave, and their brains were swooning off the charts. His subjects were seeming to have a transcendent experience. Their vagus nerves were being stimulated, causing that spreading, wandering feeling of warmth that we get when we see videos like that. It kind of causes a lump in your throat. You feel really good about yourself. There's a neurobiologist at the University of Virginia who contends that powerful moments of elevation sometimes seem to push a mental reset button, wiping out feelings of cynicism and replacing them with feelings of love and hope and optimism, a sense of moral inspiration. And when you are experiencing these emotions, you are completely moved as a human being. The Greek philosopher Longinus said the effect of elevated language upon an audience is not persuasion, but transport. We are being taken somewhere. So all of this said, we know that there are people in society that have high vagus nerve activity. They handle bereavement better. They handle stress better. They are able to bring people together. They are better in cooperative situations. And we have found that grandparents have high vagus nerve activities. So I want you to think about that. We've got so many of America's children, an increasing number of America's children, being raised by our grandparents. And these are the folks with high vagus nerve activities because they've been there, they've experienced every situation that could come about in this journey we call life. And these are the folks taking care of our grandkids. Now, folks, I don't know what to tell you, but if I had to pick and choose someone to be raising some of our most vulnerable kids, I would say it's these Vegas superstars. It's people who get it, people who have that innate sense of love and nurturing and caring for our America's children. Now, my time has run out, and I do have to get going. So I want to skip down to my closing remarks. And I just want to say thank you. My grandmother wrote a note to you all that I was going to share with you, but the gist of it was thank you for everything you do. And if you have a chance to raise your grandkids, if you have a chance to raise a niece or a nephew, it's life's most important task. It'll be the hardest thing you do, but it'll be the most important thing you'll do. And this society will be better off for your work, because when it's all said and done and our time on earth is coming to a close, what will matter most are the loving moments you spent with those you care about. You'll forget about how hard it was to raise that ornery teenager or how the new technology was confusing you. Instead, you'll treasure the moments you shared together, the times you knelt down on your knees and prayed with that child, because there, but for the grace of God, we go in this journey we call life. You will know that when you were faced with life's most important task, you stepped up to the plate and you delivered with love and compassion. You are what this society needs, and you are all who I will continue to fight for until my last breath. Thank you all, and God bless you.